Yeah, I've never done I've done podcasts, like audio and video podcasts, but never a live stream.
Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack, and we're here at Cloud Foundry Summit in Basel, Switzerland, and finishing the day with an interview with Jennifer Clower. Hey, Jennifer, how are you?
Hi, I'm great, thanks.
Friend and colleague, co-founder, executive producer of Wicked Flick Productions and the Chasing Grace project, is just now getting ready for episode 2, which will be coming up. We also are joined by Swarna Padilla, Senior Director of Community at Cloud Foundry Foundation. Hello, Swarna. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you, Alex.
And Steve Greenberg, founder of Resilience Scale.
Thanks for having me.
And I want to just thank you all for taking the time to do this recording and this live stream. And really the focus on how allies can help the fight for diversity in tech and how we can fight for inclusivity. And I just want to start by saying, there was a keynote, and Steve did the keynote this morning, and it spoke to one of my true passions, which is fly fishing, and you were using that to fly fishing to show how diversity and inclusivity is also very much related to technology and what is what we're seeing kind of emerge as more people get involved. You'll get to see this. I don't know if you've seen the 50/50 documentary from that Orvis did, which is the company that makes fly fishing gear and stuff.
Yeah.
Steve, perhaps you could give a little context for it, and then we can move into kind of the discussion.
Sure. So I saw the video, I don't know, probably shortly after it was released when Orvis announced this campaign. And so they launched this 50/50 on the water campaign, and the goal is to encourage more women to try the sport. And it's actually had incredible success, across the fly fishing community. Something like 30% of fly fishing aficionados now are actually women on the water. So I saw that video shortly after it was released, and felt pretty good about it, actually, from what they were doing. But it also inspired me to give that talk this morning.
Which then speaks to kind of a lot of discussions that Jennifer, that you are hearing these days, right? And I'm curious about this because your series is interviewing women, right, about their experiences,
Right.
And one of the things that we're seeing is how can people in positions of privilege, people who are white, right, or heterosexual white males, are typically who we talk about. How can they help other people? How can they help people, right? How can they help other members of a marginalized community?
Yeah.
While also allowing them to speak to their own lived experiences in the tech industry.
Yeah, it really depends on the women that you ask in terms of how they want men to show up to support them in the workplace and in the community. So I can't answer for all women because it's different. A lot of women say, listen and understand what our needs are as a marginalized group. So that's a great first step. But I will say, because I was just having a conversation earlier today, there's an evolution, I think, of the role of male allies in the tech community, at least in the women in tech community over the last 10 years. So I helped to start the first Women in Open Source lunch like 10 years ago at the first LinuxCon, and men weren't allowed in that lunch. The women in the open source community said, we don't want men here, we want this to be a space for us. And I actually was in the awkward position one time to actually have to ask men to leave, and it was really awkward. But about 4 or 5 years ago, men started being included in those groups, and now it's not even that they're included, they are a part of that group. So there's an evolution happening that's really exciting.
Swarna, what is your perspective on that? I'm curious because, I was thinking about the keynote this morning and, what was being discussed there, but in your own experiences, what is the role of the ally? What are you seeing? How are you seeing that role evolve?
I think it has evolved a lot, and it is a powerful role because it doesn't always put the onus on the oppressed or the people that are still struggling to find their voice or to kind of voice their concerns or opinions. So it helps them with the support that they need to elevate their voice or their position in the team or in the community. So allies are definitely helpful. As Jennifer said, the allies could be behind the screens and provide that support or sometimes can actively be the support based on what is necessary for that situation, for that person. But without that kind of support, I wouldn't have been here this day that I'm here. So I think I can speak for pretty much all, not just females or non, as you, all the characteristics that you described, not just that groups, the rest of the groups, but I think it goes for everyone, where if someone's struggling, they need support. Yes, they have to ask. Sometimes you have to kind of wait for them to ask for help, but sometimes you just have to step in and help. And that's the power of allies. And sometimes they don't even probably know that they need help. They probably don't even know that they need support. Sometimes, as Jennifer said, it's just listening. Listening helps a lot. Sharing that kind of frustrations or struggles makes them feel that they're not alone in it, that they're here among a good company.
So, Steve, when and when I was listening this morning, one of the things that really resonated for me is, I think the threat that men feel almost in the base of their inner soul, right? And you described it as like someone on a river, like the automatic response almost is like, no way. I fish on that river. You're not taking my place. And it becomes that. And isn't that true in tech too, where there's like that intrinsic, I mean, you must at times have felt it palpable almost, in your own experiences. You must have.
Yeah, so I think it extends beyond tech. I mean, honestly, I think there's a whole class of people out there that we're never going to reach. It's just not going to happen. And when you watch that video, you'll see the recording that Orvis received and the phone call that Orvis received. You're never going to reach that person. But I think there's a whole class of us that are sitting here just disgusted by what's happening in our industry, in the world, obviously on the river as well, because it's not fair. It's not right. There's no reason for it. It's just the wrong attitude. And so, it's an interesting thing that I think Orvis did, is that they addressed it head on. They knew this was going to happen, and they responded to it. And, it's an interesting position, I think, for me. I mean, I had to get a lot of encouragement from people like Swarna to actually do this, because we're just sitting here and we feel frustrated. We don't know what to do, but we want to do something. But unfortunately, I do think that there's a whole group of people that I will never reach. And I'm sure there's a whole group of people that were at this conference that I'll never reach as well. But it doesn't mean I should be quiet.
I think one of the changing points or points of conversation that Steve and I had was, I was at a small discussion, unconference kind of a discussion, and it was about how to bring diverse audiences into your meetup group or your event. I looked around in the room, and there wasn't a single white person. I specifically say white person because that's the dominant category, at least in the tech scenario here in the US. I looked around the room. It was people of all sorts of colors from different countries, people from all sorts of sexual orientation, transgender kind of community folks. Everyone was represented, and we all knew what we are up against, how we can bring the diversity into our events. I realized that we're just preaching to the choir there. Who needs to support us there is not in the room. And I just randomly tweeted that, and that kind of triggered a conversation, and where I felt that most of these events, as you said, are at least presented to the society or to the community in a way that it feels like the dominant category is not welcome to those events. They don't feel welcome there, so they're not sure if they want to join it, or if they do join it, if they're taking someone else's opportunity, if they're taking someone else's seat over there. That's when I kind of had this discussion with Steve and then with the rest of our team at the foundation, where we felt that, okay, we need to change the way we present these events, saying that it's not just for women or it's not just for this category, it's for everybody, all are welcome. It applies to the community as well, that everyone is welcome here. And that kind of motivated me to push Steve onto the main stage.
in your own work, are you hearing about this? I mean, when you're talking to people, you know, and the people you
Yeah.
interview.
Yeah, there's mixed feelings about it in, I think, the women in tech community. There's most women feel like men are the dominant population in tech and we need them in order to make progress. And frankly, unconscious bias creates scenarios where men listen to men. So when men speak up, other men are going to hear that more easily than they may hear it from a woman. There are women in the community that feel like they don't need men at all, right? I don't want to eliminate that contingent because they exist. The episode that I'm doing right now includes the community theme, and within that community theme, we're going to explore the role of male allies. And so I've went really deep on this, and there are differing opinions, but the majority of women believe, like in any oppressed society, you need the dominant population to help lift you up. Throughout history, whenever there is a successful rise, it's with the help of the dominant culture.
Well, we saw that in the civil rights struggle in the 50s, when, you know, and into the 60s, when we saw it was really it was the black community that stood up and were considered the radical ones for speaking up for themselves, right? They were considered radicals.
Yeah, right, exactly. So yeah, like I said, I'm hearing from both sides of the spectrum. I recently had an interesting conversation about, should there be women in tech spaces, men in tech spaces, and then, you know, collaborative spaces for men and women to come together, because there is a need for, you know, women to have conversations, you know, in what they consider a safe place. One of the women that's featured in episode 2 was sued for not allowing men into her town hall groups. And unfortunately, it was a men's rights organization, and they do this. They take down women's businesses. But she flipped her policy because it actually, in California, there is a law where she was going to lose her business if she didn't settle. So I'm giving away a little bit of the story.
It's
but
fine, no.
yeah, but she called on her community, both men and women, and they helped, you know, the business survive. And she's actually working with the ACLU to change the law in California so that it's not perverted. But, you know, this is something where, so the net of that in the conversations I've had recently, in fact, as recent as Saturday interview, is that we need all kinds of spaces, right? We need all kinds of spaces to work and collaborate and to advance progress.
And, you know, you were just talking about this, and like how there's so many people of so many different orientations, right? And there are a lot of people who are quite marginalized. And you mentioned, for instance, like people in the LGBTQ community, people who are, you know, who may also be autistic, right? And they may be disabled, right? You know, what is the role of the ally, you know, for people who've just grown up being so marginalized? Because you see it, for example, in like how open source organizations are structured, right? Maintainers, right? You know, for example, like, who are the maintainers? How do the maintainers, you know, rise to that role, right? And who are those maintainers, and what role do they play as allies? I'm curious on your perspective on that as well.
So I come from a conservative, religious South Indian family, and I was not born and raised with these kind of moral values. It was, of course, being kind to everyone has always been in our DNA, but we had our own restrictions and walls when I grew up. But slowly, as I grew up, I realized, especially after moving to the US and after kind of going through all these struggles, that those don't make sense. Those walls that we put up when I was growing up don't make sense. So I had to tear myself down, and yes, I was the radical or the troublemaker as well. But now I feel that I'm at least in a position where I can support someone. So it's not just male allies. Sometimes I'm an ally, because if I feel that something is not right, like our events team is always extremely careful about, or extremely diligent about making sure that they pay attention to all the details, like non-binary restrooms, the communication stickers, the pronoun stickers. If there is a detail that they probably haven't thought of, or they probably did not consider it yet, I mention it to them. How about this? How about for people that are probably differently able, what if they're not able to hear it? Or what if the main stage is too loud that it triggers something else for them? So we kind of accommodate all sorts of requirements, all sorts of abilities. And we learn from each other. I learn from our events team, I learn from the foundation team, I learn from people in the community. And the way we also kind of try and bring different people onto the main stage or into any kind of higher elevation in the community, it gives them the confidence that they need to feel good about themselves and say that, kind of reassure themselves that they're capable of doing it. That eventually kind of grows into their confidence to become the committer. So eventually, yes, the community's contributor committer population will change, but without bringing that confidence, without giving them the support to get kind of improve their own confidence, it's hard to do that. So that's the foundations part on how we do that, and we require allies all over the community for that.
So I do want to say something from my perspective about this whole ally thing, because I don't view myself as an ally.
Right.
Like I'm a guy that, quite honestly, like I follow a lot of advocates from tech companies on Twitter, and I probably learn 90% more, 9 times the amount from the women that I follow on Twitter than anywhere else. So this whole notion that somehow men are better at tech is just absurd, and I'm frustrated. I'm not an ally. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me, right?
Yeah.
When I think about somebody judging somebody for who they love or what they look like or anything else, it just drives me insane. I mean, the only person that can judge me is me, really. And I'm a hard enough judge. Like, why do we need all these other people judging other people? And so, on the one hand, it's nice that you think of like, oh, well, he's an ally and he'll stand up for me. But I just feel like it's the right thing to do. Like, everybody is who they are, and it's obvious that we're all better off when we get to live that way.
Our allies stand up for the right thing.
Well,
But you're an ally too,
but
right? And you're an ally too.
Well,
so
and why do we even need to call it out? I think that's your
Right.
point. And I agree. I think we'll get to a place where, like, even the word male ally, like, it's just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's just like, it's just
Yeah.
a weird term,
It is,
and
yeah.
and I wish that it wasn't needed. So I agree with you.
I agree with you. Yeah, I wish it wasn't needed too. I wish that term didn't exist. It was just people that are, I don't know, not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I agree. Yeah.
It's frustrating.
Well, silence is deafening, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Silence is dangerous too sometimes.
And when silence is deafening, it means that the people in power are not saying anything.
Yeah.
Isn't it true?
Yeah, I just think that allies exist everywhere, both men and women.
They do.
Yeah, and in fact, the way that we're telling the story in the next episode is about allies. We're not calling it male or female allies. We're calling it allies, people who are intentional, right, about supporting and advancing the careers of women in tech. One male ally, for what it's worth, male ally, who I interviewed, I asked him, what does it mean to you to be a male ally? And he says, it's not like climbing Everest and you get to the mountaintop and you've got it figured out. It's just being you and being supportive of, the men and women in your community. And you never get there. It's not like you cross the finish line. You're like, I'm a male ally. Need a badge, right? It's an ongoing thing, just like life.
And it has to be tangible, doesn't it? I mean, because otherwise you're speaking in vagaries. I mean, in one of the resonating, points that was made, I think, through looking at this Orvis, is if you think about people who really love angling, right, who love fly fishing, they love the river, they love the water, they love that, and those people are often the greatest conservationists you'll find, right? They believe in the river, they believe in the health of the river, they believe in the health of vital, rich ecosystems, right? So how do you make that tangible then, in tech? Because I can definitely feel it, and I think we all know, right? If you look at like the evolution of machine learning and artificial intelligence, but who's actually making those? Who are the engineers who are actually building these technologies, and how does that affect our own health?
It kind of
and
goes
welfare?
back to the whole safety testing that happened in automobiles, right? Back in the day, they were the dummies that were used to test the safety levels of the cars was not designed for female bodies or pregnant women as well. So it was hard. And going back to your machine learning example, it kind of goes back to incorporating the machine learning algorithms or the technology into considering all the different profiles of people. It could be gender orientations or sexual orientations. Like even the most recent news that I heard was jarring was how so many black women face serious health issues, especially during labor. That is something that we cannot ignore. And most times our biases kind of step up in place. And for example, even if I go to my kid's school and mention something about kids' progress or something, oh, you're just an Indian mom, you're focused on more on academics. It's not that. You cannot put up your bias like that. So it's the same thing when a black woman complains about a health issue. You cannot just say that, oh, you're black, you always complain. You have to focus and pay attention or pay extra caution to listen and understand and apply this technology to different backgrounds and different kind of personalities as well.
The female crash test dummies is an example I always use because female crash test dummies didn't come out until 2011.
What's that?
Female crash test dummies didn't
The-
come out until 2011, and women were 46% more likely to be seriously injured in a car accident because cars were designed with the average height and weight of white men. So, I mean, that's an example of why I'm doing the project I'm doing, right? I want to recruit and retain women for tech and give them a platform to be seen for their experiences. But number one, I want to recruit and retain them because we all have to build the future or we're going to live in a dangerous and less inclusive world than we live in today. I mean, that's what it's all about.
That's a pretty scary thought.
Yeah.
There's this
I didn't know it was not here until 2011.
there was this, and it becomes just so ingrained that people just don't even, they just go about their day. Their behaviors become set. There's so many examples of this. I mean, there was a story today I saw about Amazon's, they have like set up a hiring kind of a phone line, but but any woman who called up to apply for a job was immediately rejected. So the algorithm was broken. But if you're that person applying for that job, you don't necessarily know that because you're blind to actually what is happening. So the results are real.
I think with artificial, I mean, I'm not a technologist, I'm a storyteller, but with artificial intelligence, I mean, it's really scary. We won't even know what we don't know, right? And so everybody's got to be building those technologies today. I think it's more important than ever.
All right. This has been a really great discussion. I think I could talk for quite a long time on this one.
Absolutely.
But Swarn, I just wanted to just conclude it with you about the Cloud Foundry Foundation and what are your dreams for the foundation? What are your dreams for it, for your personal dreams? What are your personal dreams for the foundation?
I think we're making a lot of progress. When compared to Boston Summit in April, here we have 25% that identify themselves as non-white males or non-males in the attendees. So that's a significant jump where we were 12% in Boston. So for a European summit to have that kind of increase, it's a huge progress. We still have, as Steve said, we still have ways to go. For this community, at least as in my role, I have a personal goal to make sure that when someone looks at this community, they not only find it more welcoming and inclusive, but also they feel so passionate that they kind of use Cloud Foundry community as a kind of an example for other communities to follow. I know we already do that internally. Like I've been here for almost a year. I've never had an issue where I got rejected by anyone when I asked for help or when I asked a question. No one turned me down. That kind of inclusiveness or openness is already there. The kindness is already there. We just have to make it more explicit, especially for folks that are looking at this community brand new.
Thank you so much for your time. I've been enjoying here for this discussion with Jennifer Clower, co-founder, executive producer of Wicked Flick Productions. Good luck with this next series. We're loving what you've done. Your work has just been so fantastic. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Swarna Padilla, Senior Director of Community Cloud Foundry Foundation.
Thank you.
You're such a great addition to this foundation.
Thank you.
It's really wonderful to see what you've done just in the short time you've been there. And Steve Greenberg, founder of Resilient Scales, thank you so much for sharing that keynote today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Alex.
Thanks.